I'm gonna speak a little bit about Canada here. Um, Canada, in my opinion, is like living in an apartment building where you don't know any of your neighbors, and you might know one or two, and you might be able to relate to them. But ultimately, you're a whole bunch of people living in one building who never know each other. You might run into each other and bump into each other, but ultimately, you have completely different um, ideas on life and perspectives. And as a Canadian, there's not really anything that holds us together as a nation. I'm not sure if other countries have this problem, but I've noticed this quite badly in Canada that when people immigrate here, it almost becomes like they go to their own groups where they are with people from where they came from, and they socialize with people because they can relate. Whereas Canadians, not so much. There's nothing that we find that we relate to each other completely, but we all have different um, ethnic backgrounds, and we try and relate with our sports and things like that. We try, but ultimately we I find that we are considerably different between each other. You have, and when you go from one end of the country to the other, you have no um, complete relation. You might no ethnic background sort of thing, or religious ideals or anything like that. I find that you are completely different. You know, and I would find that it'd be quite a good thing that if we as Canadians sat down and came up with what it was to be a Canadian, came up with some ideas that make us connected, so that when we don't have to feel so different. Because I don't think that it matters. As a Canadian, it's not a white country, it's not a African country, and it's not an Asian country. It's not a country made up of one ethnic group. It's a country made up of many ethnic groups, and I think that we could all probably find common ground so we could relate to each other more to make this a stronger country. Because right now it feels to me like I said, an apartment complex where you end up not actually knowing anyone, and you might have completely different views on things. Not that if you have the same, but there's no common ground. I find that, and and I know that this is quite an issue here, and I don't know about other countries so much, but I would expect some other countries probably have the same issues. But I have no ideas of where to start with this, but I think that there's people out there who really that energy should be put into this to establish what a Canadian is, or what we believe. Not like we do now, where we associate ourselves with our sports, and where we're a peacekeeping nation. Where realistically, that's a small portion of what we actually do and go out in our free healthcare and things like that. Yeah, it does somewhat establish who we are, that we believe in these things, but it's more of a establishments that we've set up that we recognize ourselves, not by a belief or an idea behind us. And I find that when people come into the country, they more start to push their own ideas upon us, because we have such a relaxed idea of what a Canadian is. Um, if we were able, like, to accept other cultures is a wonderful thing. To push out another culture would be a bad idea. But if we could take and make them so that they could still have their culture, but at the same time they could adapt into the Canadian culture, which right now we have very little of. The closest thing that we have to Canadian culture is, I guess, Native heritage, but ultimately most of them don't seem to completely celebrate or practice. Seems and yeah, I think that we should find a way to take what we have been in the past, discriminating against these people, and put that in the past, because I think that the idea that we are all a Canadian should that we should be feel more united by that idea that we're Canadian, where now more people would probably, when you ask someone, they would probably say where they were from. They'd say they were Chinese, and even if they were a Canadian citizen, even if they were second or third generation, they might still say that they're Chinese, because they'll feel more connected to that heritage than what the Canadian heritage is. yeah, that's my main idea here is that we should just, as a nation, somehow get together and figure out what it is to be Canadian. Um, that's all. I thank you for listening, and I would hope that you guys who might watch this will hopefully take the time to actually think about this and realize that this could be a potential issue that ultimately any country who has this issue might also ultimately just collapse as a nation and become more of the heritage of the immigrants, less, and then the country will dissolve. With which I guess is not the end of the world, but some I think that that this would be a good start, and then ultimately we could take the whole world and put it together more by just coming up with what we need as people. But those are just my thoughts on it. Hope you guys think about it.